How y'all be, man? Hairless minx of the blue sea. It's me. We back. Time for that Friday hot and fresh. Y'all know what it is with me. Let's get right into it. Chapter 1029. I've been wanting to holler at y'all for a couple of weeks. Scheduling just didn't work out. Even though we had a break, it sucked, man. It was like 2 or 3 times. But yeah. I'm good. I'm good. We here. It's One Piece time. First off, the cover. Joey Bonnie with the otters. All I could think about was them otters from YouTube and Bonnie because of her ability, obviously, and how it may tie to Momo later if there's some reversal of Shinobu's jutsu, right? fruit mixed with jutsu. That's all I thought about. And every time I see Bonnie, I still think about Akainu and the fact that before we saw her during the Return of Reverie arc, and it's something I brought up in my sword video. Not a shameless plug, because I don't got no shame to talk about my own stuff. I just don't promote it, right? But before we saw her Return of Reverie, the last hands we saw her in was Akainu's during the failed trade between Zeha and even knowing like, nah, we don't want that kind of smoke, especially not in that environment, right? They would have got low diff. Even at that stage with two fruits, he still probably loses. So we won't even get into that one, right? Let's get into the chapter. We open up with Sanji and Queen, which is cool because after a break, we come right back where we're supposed to be at, right? And at least by what I think personally, what I want to see. I want to see what's going on with Sanji. And we seen his face messed up, which he could fix himself, unlike Yonji, who needed a hydraulic press thing that back in Whole Cake Island. And even Queen again for the second time, bringing up Armin and Haki in reference to the Germa genetic durability enhancements, right? That can't be for no reason, and because we see each arc, the technology, even on the marine side too, has been progressing every arc. Like when we first were joking about hockey bullets, and then Capone brings up, or Sea Stone bullets, and then Capone brings it up in Whole Cake Island dealing with Caesar, and just Punk Hazard, and knowing that Vegapunk is the only person who made a devil fruit, and what the SSG potentially may be a technological advancement, including the ancient weapon of not necessarily potentially Momo or Shirahoshi being a living, living person or creature being, however you want to put it, but Pluton's probably not alive, right? So that's a piece of technology itself, in a sense. So we know what the end game of technology can be, and the fact that even Enel's technology being able to leave leave the planet and go into space. So eventually, technology is going to have to do something that's incredible to keep up with the type of characters and the power that we're going to be dealing with and what they're trying to achieve. And just think about how strong Roger was. You had to have something besides strong characters to deal with these pirates who are getting stronger and stronger as time goes by. So seeing this brought up through the use of Sanji to me is cool because it not only gives a conflict for him to that he's been off and on dealing with every time we hear the name Vince Smoke, right? Because he probably wants to change. What might end up happening because of what he said to Kuma, right, about being a threat to the government and whatnot. Not just because of being a straw hat, but he knew he was a Vince Smoke already. Well, I don't really know what Sanji's plans have to do if they end up tying to the Vince Smoke bloodline and heritage, where maybe he changes the perception, where because of the Sora comics, right, relating to his mother and the story of Sora, like the actual story of Sora, and then Sanji himself, if he does end up taking up that name in a positive light to change the perception of it, that might be like another part of his all blue in a sense, where because he's coming to terms with himself and his blood doesn't make him, right? He makes what his blood is. The same way he responded to Queen about having, the Lunarian comment and I can create fire because of my passion, me, himself, which he's a representation of his mother and his only positive relationship growing up, besides raise you every now and again, right? He didn't have any of that before his death. So, what that represents for him, the thought of him losing that because of the emotional downside, right, of these abilities and genetic enhancements, that to him is terrifying. Sanji's not even smoking a cigarette. The last time we see him this shook up was with Puddin' at Whole Cake Island. You know, all gags aside, dealing with women, Sanji has never been a panicky character. He usually just thinks about what has to happen, maybe smokes a cigarette and two, and then he has at it, and he takes care of business. As long as there's no women involved, he's straight. So for him to feel this way, I'm taking this serious. And this isn't just like how we thought, like with the Reisu situation of how easily he just put it on, right? To now look what happened and the conflict of that, especially knowing that he didn't want to wear it and he did at that time. How is that going to come to play later if there's some other side effects? Like the side effects I've always thought about, because I don't trust Judge when he wore the raid suit, I've always had the back in my mind, those clones have a command. And if you remember the other thing about the Vinsmoke children, which it's very arguable towards the end of Whole Cake, but being able to defy Judge's commands and how the clones had to obey Judge's commands, were like even when he did the little psychic ability, whatever you want to call it, the wall thing, that kind of thing I could see happening to him later, and that's what I would be worried about. Not necessarily, plenty of characters have had a quote unquote split personality, especially in anime in general. Not even just anime, but cartoons or characters in general that are nonfiction, right? That's always a thing. Conflict within a person is always a thing, but a lot of times it's just represented by another person within that person. This is different with Sanji because there is none of that. It's just him versus himself and him versus what he thinks about what the Vinsmoke represent because of how he was raised. Now, how that ties back to how the Vinsmoke may have been originally, who knows? And because of their dealings with the world government. And what, like I said, that could mean something later in the story. We really don't know. And honestly, after Whole Cake Island, I wasn't sure, other than the race suit ever coming up, I wasn't sure if his backstory was really going to matter as much anymore. And now we see that's far from the case. The first time we learn more about Queen and this whole science thing, we knew this was going to be referenced because there's been reference for 3 arcs now, like the scientific community and Dr. Vegapunk alone. So anything related to him was going to be important later because he's the key to all the answers that we don't know for the most part. That doesn't have to do with instant messenger Sama. And like I've stated, time and time, the odds of him not, even if he doesn't know instant messenger Sama or ever seen, the odds of him not putting two to two together that there's some kind of creature leader that exists wouldn't make any sense to me, given how far advanced he is in understanding not just technology. That probably goes along with human behavior. For the same reason he would do something like give Kuma that a request that he wanted to give. I know that gets talked about a lot, but why else do something like that? So we see the difference with Judge, where he wanted to improve the Vinsmoke bloodline for power reasons, to reclaim what they lost, supposedly. That's what he says, right? And he's done everything to do that. Even he sacrificed his wife and his kids for this. Whether that's right or, in his eyes, that's right. To us, that's just like, you sacrifice everything, actual humans. Like, what are you doing? But in his eyes, because of what they lost and what that may represent, not to mention what he might know, he might know more about the truth about some of the other stuff that we, the reader, are not aware of. So I kind of understand. I don't agree with what Judge is doing, but I understand someone going that far, depending on how serious the One Piece world is as far as like oppression is concerned and other stuff that we're going to get to in the end of the series. Doesn't make it right, but using logic, trying to understand a person that I'm not, I could just say, okay, I could see doing that. Like, that's how much you believe, because there's no future in his eyes. But at the same time, he's manipulative, and what he did to Sanji is just like, I don't know who was worse, him or whoa, no. One Glad Kaido, and the way he raised Yamato. I don't know who's worse. They're both terrible. They're just absolutely trash. So for Sanji to be fighting with that and getting power from it at the same time that's a different kind of conflict. And it's crazy to me just because Sanji is the opposite of Momo, right? Where Momo's trying to live up to his bloodline because of being a Kazuki and knowing how boss his pops was and knowing the importance even at 8 years old and wanting to be what your blood represents. You got Sanji, he either wants to change what it represents, whether by accident or purpose, I don't know, because clearly he's still fighting with that internally. But at some point, I think that's a conclusion that he can come to is just to, since he can't get rid of the name and people are going to keep doing this, I'll just change what this name means, man, because y'all not going to keep doing that. So in my mind, that's kind of like, what area I feel like that could go. So that's why I was really interested in that. And then in the fact that hockey being compared to technology and the Vegapunk thing I talk about all the time, the relationship between hockey, sea stone, devil fruits, and to include the ancient weapons, right? So there it is with that. Anel's Maxim, which I'll talk about Anel because I was reminded of him in this chapter later. But that's what I was thinking about, the command thing, the fact that maybe Sanji could end up being controlled in some way that could be very detrimental later in the story. Now let's get to Big Mamu and Kid, useless D mid. Law was so pissed off. He was not happy. Kid, you're trash. He sounded like people in the community. That's how I know, Oda be knowing what people say about characters and stuff. Like you can tell, like the way he talk at SBSs and interviews and stuff. Like he know what's up. So this thing with Kid he's back at it again, man. Kid looking like trash, even though it's not his fault this time. You know what I mean, and where that story's gonna go for him, because this is supposedly a rival. And if you look what Luffy's trying to do by himself, him and Law together is trying to achieve the same goal with Big Mom. Um, I don't know how that's going to work out and what that's going to look after Wano as far as the world government is concerned, threat wise, and whatever Big News Morgan spies us in Wano, because they're there. There's nowhere they're not. And we don't even know where Big News Morgan's is going in the first place. So then Big Mom been wanting to catch up to him anyway, because the last article he wrote about Luffy that had everybody just wilding in the One Piece world and in real life, Mr. Fibianco himself. So I think that Kid trying to overcome this adversity is a little different than just your average, like, because it's another character that's not a main character that is supposed to be in the story for later, or what level he's supposed to be, right? What he represents. The other supernova you can't really tell sometimes, but clearly there's a couple where you're like, okay, they could really supposed to be a rival, supposedly, and they really was doing stuff out here. Because Kid was getting hype way before Luffy was. We just didn't hear about it, and he was out there just wilding to the point where he ran into a Yonko before Luffy did. If you think about him losing his arm and even saying, I'm going to go after Shanks, which we see that came into play this chapter, but I don't think that's the only reason that's there, right? Just for this moment. I think that's being brought up again is reminding everybody, like, hey, Yonko's the reason why he doesn't have an arm. And maybe they go in, maybe we get into that a little bit, whether it be through Killer or Kid, because he's trying to overcome adversity in front of Big Mom. Maybe we flash back to the last time he was in front of a Yonko that wasn't Kaido, because right now he's 0 for 3. So him being to lose the ability because of Hawkins, oh, that would be sickening. Not him just losing on his own, but losing because he's literally being nerfed in the story. Like, we never see characters that know they're being nerfed. We just see it happen. Like Kid is telling Oda, like, hey, man, don't do me like this, bro. Like, don't do me like this. But using that to show the bond and what a right-hand man represents, right? Because when you think about right-hand man in the story, most of us immediately think Zoro, right? Because the main character. But then you still have Rayleigh, right? Scottie Pippen to Michael Jeffrey Jordan, And then on top of that, you got Ben Beckman and how he's supposed to be presented in the story. Katakuri, without Katakuri, whole cake would have fell apart a long time ago, right? We all know he's the organized one. He's the brains. Like Big Mom has her connection since she's Big Mom, but clearly Katakuri is a part of the main reason why that's kept running. Many times Zoro tells Luffy, hey, you got to keep it together. That's your role. And smarter characters and good leaders understand they have to have somebody like that right next to them because they're not going to be successful without that person. You can't have everybody telling you you're right all the time. You got to have people giving you constructive criticism. And even if you don't like the way they're represented, as long as you know they're giving you the honest truth that you asked for, then it's going to make you better. And so when you're a right hand man and having that connection is that position and a friendship, a brotherhood, these two, it is what it is. Ride or die. That's what Killer, and and Kid represents, saying like Luffy and Zoro, and even with Capone, like you think of Capone, you think of Gotti, as is every person in the story has that. Even the Marines technically have that because you don't think of one admiral. I mean, a lot of us think of the admirals separately for other reasons, but you think of them as a group, right? And they're right, like they're right hand men to each other in a sense, like their basic function. That's what it's supposed to be. So yeah, I like what's going on, and I liked that basically Hawkins was on his head down from Naruto. I'm just bash my head into this pillar of concrete, man. And then Killer having to sit there being affected by the smile. It's similar to what Sanji's going through, worried about his emotions and how they can be manipulated outside of what his own control is, right? Where you watching your captain's dreams dying right before your eyes, and you can't even kill the dude because you're gonna kill your captain's dreams. That's a crazy dilemma. And then now you got to sit here and laugh it up. On top of that, oh man, it's just like Otoko, Yasue. Like this is, just trying to pull on some major chords here. He's doing a pretty good job if you think about the scope of somebody's dream disappearing. The same thing that Luffy says, like, you know, it's easier for me to just take your dream away. I don't have to kill you. Well, Oda's reasoning for why Luffy doesn't kill is just like taking your dream away is so much more demeaning. And something Killer said to Hawkins, right? Like Hawkins said, he told Hawkins, you quit. You work for the Yonko. You're cool with this. My captain has ambition, just like we do. And then and then Hawkins is like, kind of recognized that. So he even enjoys it even more, knowing what he's trying to take away from Kid right now. And then even thinking it back to Sky Island, when Kaido jumped from Sky Island, how far, and everything Kid and Killer have been through, all going to disappear. And Hawkins knows some of that stuff more than likely, right? Because he had to be around Kid long enough to place that doll on him in the first place. And it's probably not something he just did recently. It may have been there for there's really no telling when he created one and what he needs. It might be similar to a Vivi card, where maybe it only takes a day or two, and then that's it. Once he makes one, he can't, you can't do nothing about it, especially if you don't know. He was waiting for the right time. And him in front of a Yonko, if you're a scheming conniver like Hawkins, a grimy McGrimeball, this is the perfect time to implement your plans, especially when you know you were supposed to die to law and you didn't. He had an advantage up until a certain point, before X Drake and all that other stuff. But we know in any normal situation, he gets low diff by law more than likely. Law is just, that's why I didn't understand why law didn't figure this out. But then again, you're in front of Big Mama. Your focus better be Big Mama, especially after dealing with her up on the roof. But speaking of which, Law is supposed to be smart, right? And he is. Why did he pull a Sasuke versus Killer B and decide to use Counter Shock on someone who we've seen summon lightning multiple times, to the point where you decided you need to separate the cloud and put him in a box? But then again, it's called Counter Shock. So I don't know. I just thought that was like a Sasuke Killer B moment where, like, dude, look at my headband, bro. You know what time it is out here, But I enjoyed the chapter, like, because of how deep they went into. It wasn't just a few things, right? Sanji and Killer, with the relationship with Kid, got a lot of shine, where it didn't feel rushed or nothing. And then the weight of it feels a little bit more like, sometimes I feel like the Scabbard should have got more of this level. Like, we get it more in the anime. It's easier to be representative, in a sense, but this is kind of like what people, I'm guessing, like what level they're talking about. I know you can't do this every chapter, but look how it only took one or two chapters, and the difference in how connected you probably felt to Killer before, even if you even cared about him, compared to now in just a few chapters, with a character we barely had time with. So that impact is always a big deal to me. Then you got somebody like Hawkins, who's in the anime and manga. You know he is. And I said this before in a few places. Hawkins uses devil fruit to make Yu-Gi-Oh cards, right? And then he takes those cards and creates a jutsu, right, to summon the Shinigami with his, that's what that is, right? The thing that Hawkins ended up decapitating that Zoro fought earlier, right? You could either say it's a Shinigami or it's a Bankai, either way, because he does have a sword. So I guess it is more of a Bankai. It has a Shikai. Hawkins is out here with these abilities, man. My man does his research. He just didn't predict what happened in this chapter to the point where he says, I didn't predict that. And it's funny to me. Well, not funny, but I don't know if it's a direct reference, but it's something we heard before. And what Killer tells to Hawkins. He basically says, Hawkins, you're a loser. You gave up on your ambition because you lost to Kaido. You didn't have no problem submitting. We didn't. You say our odds are impossible. We're still here. We're not even supposed to be alive, but we are. Screw what you say. Again, it's a reference to Capone and Katakuri. You can see the future, homie, but that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. I'm already defying it right now in front of you. So when the tower card comes into play, which we've seen Hawkins cards before, the actual design, not just plot, but the actual design, what they look like. This is the most I remember seeing of them because he showed quite a few, and I think some of those are for a reason. Now, I will say, I wasn't even thinking about the actual tower reference, and if you even think right during the fight at the end where Hawkins says the tower where he draws, basically for y'all Duel Links players, this who Killer triggered Destiny draw on Hawkins, and then Hawkins he drew the reborn man, and he was like, my strong man can't die, right? What's interesting is it's a Shinigami looking thing that Killer ends up beheading, right? We know he's known as the Decapitator. That's been in the story the whole time since he's been in the story. He did, in a sense, he basically killed death, right? Killing the odds that they were supposed to die. Hawkins' cards are not done. Hawkins might be out to fight. He might even be dead, but his cards ain't done. Because there's still that whole who the 1% was about, and there's still 2 or 3 things having to do with Hawkins cards that still probably will come into play. So I do think that he's done, but those things, whatever they are, don't be surprised if they pop up again. And the other thing I like about the tower reference has to do with Zoro, right? Because Zoro actually has a move called Tower Climb. It's been in the story forever, and there's other references to that. So the mythology behind it, or not mythology, the real life part of the tower references is interesting. And every time we've talked about change in the story, because change isn't talked about much, right? It's talked about in a scope of depending on the location of where the Straw Hats are. But the whole world, every time we've talked about change happened. Law, if you think about Law breaking the gear speech, you think about Roger in a sense, you think about Whitebeard, you think about Dofi and his Throne War speech. Every time, Odin, every time change has been discussed in the story, things do change. And in a sense, that goes for me too. And what I think about the Yonko. Like, I know they're not all powerful, but I still don't think Luffy is 1v1 in Kaido. Even though I know he's going to achieve the goal, I just think he's going to do his thing. You can still go 11 rounds. You can still go, even if you go 6 rounds with Kaido. To me, that's enough as a person. That's just my own opinion. You know what I mean? I still wouldn't be calling him. It's just hard, man, to call somebody an equal if you can't compete to a certain extent. So as long as he can do that, it is what it is. I still think it's out here. But in a way, Oda's talking to me too, and people like me, we're reading the story that, hey man, things have to change. All these big bads gonna have to go down. And how they go down, we gonna see whether you like it or not. The change gotta happen. Again, Fujitora told Dofi the same thing. The change has to happen. So whether that change happens with Big Mom in front of Law and Kid, I don't know. I don't know about that one, Chief. You see, I sound kind of shaky on that one, bro. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm a high believer in variance and probability. A lot of things usually have at the bare minimum a non-zero chance. So I don't like to say what can't happen. I just say what I think is not going to happen. In regards to that, I just think that's what it is. But Luffy always surprises, man, and it's always impressive. I didn't like the Gats thing in Dressrosa. That wasn't impressive, but when he cracked Doflamingo, that was very impressive. Getting, of course, Rayleigh loved Death Gear 4 the first time he saw it. But that happens to Luffy a lot. It was just realistic, right? You don't expect him to just be wiping the floor at everybody. If he just ran up on Shanks and one shot him, this series would be trash. That's what everybody would be saying. So we're gonna see what's up though. Oh, the tower thing. The other thing about the cards or the tower, what I thought when I first saw it, from a goofy standpoint, I was thinking about Capone and like, okay, maybe he's saying Nell's gonna come back and kill Capone. You know, I went way wild with it. I just, you guys know how that gets sometimes, but I thought it was funny because there's this. You could just see it, like, oh, okay, a lightning bolt came down. You could just, I already know it's probably people already saying crazy stuff like that, but that's what I came up with. Obviously, it's more of a reference to Tarrant and Hawkins' character and real life references. But I thought it was interesting when he said the tower, and immediately, right, Killer just jumps over it before he strikes Kid down. So it's like, okay, I see what you on, Oda. I don't always catch everything, but I catch little stuff like that. We was all over the left arm theory, and Oda went in his Taite Kubo bag and made somebody lose a limb. We ain't seen that in a while. We'll see what's up with that too, because that not having arms, that's rough. That's rough. But yeah, I think that's really all I wanted to talk about, man. This chapter was pretty straightforward. I just like how in depth it was about a few things, and I don't know what's going on next week. I guess Sanji's gonna have to find some resolve about this, and eventually we'll get back to Roof Piece and King and Zoro are in an isolated area. We haven't seen X Drake in a while. I thought about him when I was thinking about Law earlier and Kid at the fight. I'm like, yeah, where's X Drake? And Hiyori and whoever. We know what Orochi's doing now, but I think we're going to probably stay here maybe one more chapter, and then halfway through the chapter we do something else, because now that Hawkins is taken down and he's secured the doll and all that, or disposed of the doll. I don't know if Hawkins is dead or not, but maybe that survival is him. Maybe the part of the tower reference had to do with himself not knowing that disaster was coming, because he did have that prediction. So maybe it was a reference to him and he just didn't know it, because maybe the cards don't always tell him who, it just tells him it, right? And he just goes with that. So we'll see what's up with that. But yeah, man, I think that's pretty much it. There wasn't no secret scroll stuff. There wasn't no crazy theory stuff. It's pretty, like I said, pretty straightforward. And yeah, that's what I think about the Germa and how that can go with Sanji. And that's what I think about the Harkins and Killer situation and how important the right hand position is in this story and in real life. And we'll see the emotional struggles, man. And we're going to be here for it, man, because change is coming. And the series has to end at some point, because who knows where we're going after this with the Yako situation. I just don't think Big Mom's going down right now, man. And as long as she's still around, she's still a force. But Luffy did just say after. He did say after Kaido. He's always instructed that it would be after Kaido. So I don't know, man. That's gonna be wild. Y'all enjoy your weekend. Have fun in your streams. I'll see some of y'all on some discords and all that good stuff that we like to do. Appreciate y'all stopping by. We'll talk Monday, because I got some special Paramecia stuff that I've been thinking about and working on, in terms of certain characters. Just a couple in particular, because special Paramecia seems like, again, as the tech advanced, so will the character's abilities. And special Paramecia wasn't thrown out there for nothing. And I've been thinking about it. I've had a lot to think about the past few weeks that I couldn't talk about. So we'll get into that next week, just letting y'all know what's coming with that note. And I don't know when's the next episode of Tripping Through Time. We'll have to see on that one, because I just literally haven't had the time, no pun intended. But figured I'd at least come on and talk to y'all, let y'all know what's going on. And yeah, I'll see y'all around. Peace.